And welcome to Karger Publishers' first LinkedIn Live event. My name is Jeff Covey. I'm the Head of Healthcare Markets at Karger, and I will be your host today as we speak with Emily Lewis on the latest in digital medicine. Emily is the Global Digital Transformation Lead for Neurology at UCB and is also part of Karger's Ambassador program. Emily, thank you very much for joining us and welcome. Firstly, please could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your work and passion for digital medicine?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Jeff, and thanks to Karger for the opportunity. It's great to be here. So yeah, a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry about 17 years now, so I had the privilege or have the privilege of having known what this field was like prior to this, idea of digital medicine and digital health. So I come from a strong clinical operations background in research where essentially I remember the days of kind of the three-part NCR paper with the white copy, the yellow copy, and the pink copy, and you had to write all the way through all three layers. And I remember, as a study coordinator having to write on that and then having to do double data entry into the computer system. So all this redundancy, I remember back in the day. But really, I've always been fascinated about, how we translate these solutions from research to care. And so I did work in a lot of medical devices early on. I worked in drug-eluting stents and mitral valve clips. And I remember really thinking through, how do we train these physicians and healthcare providers to actually bring this stuff into existing care workflows and really translating this into medicine? So I think I've always been passionate about being close to the data, close to patients, and really understanding from my early days what it's like to be a study coordinator or a study monitor, very close to both the patients and the data. But my passion for digital really happened around 6 years ago. So I kind of saw, as I mentioned, the redundancy in the system and really this just kind of antiquated system of way of doing things. Even though we were using computers, we weren't using them effectively. And so really, I think I've been a champion of decentralized trials ever since about 6 years ago when I joined a decentralized trials company. And I really worked to kind of gain adoption for these decentralized methods in which we brought data collection into the home. And this was all pre-pandemic, mind you. So this was a very hard sell. People were not really understanding the value of this. But I think deep down, I've always sort of known that we've been on the precipice of a lot of change in this industry. We've seen other industries certainly change and be digitized, certainly in finance and in, in shopping like Amazon, for example, so in retail. But, healthcare has really been one of the last ones to really adopt digital. So, it was when I started joining this startup that I really understood what we could do and started playing with what we could do to bring research into the home. And so I was sort of part of this inflection point where we started thinking about how do we build one platform where both the source data and the clinical data live in one place. It's user-friendly, the patients themselves use it, the caregivers use it, and the study team uses it. So everybody's all in the same place. And that we were kind of intentionally redesigning this whole process, right? So we were kind of being daring at the time. It was scary, it was unknown. And so every day it was sort of making things up as I go along. We had some strategic partners, luckily, that partnered with us early and committed to making this change and gave us some very difficult protocols to try to decentralize. But, the overall idea is that we want to try to make healthcare and research more predictive, prognostic, and accessible. So health equity has always been kind of central to this idea of digitizing and the digitalization of healthcare. And so really, health equities are staggering at this point, and we really want to use digital to see how we can level the playing field for more wellness-focused care rather than sick care. So, and that's just not just in the U.S., but globally. So, my journey has been thinking through how we bring trials into the home, how we make them more patient-centric, and how we translate that research into care for digital products that are in patients' hands way long after the research is done and we've proven that the outcomes are there and they're safe and effective.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I agree. I mean, let's just be very interesting, I think, to see how digital will start perhaps leveling out the playing field within healthcare. So I think that's certainly something that I'll be interested to see, roll out over time. I hope you don't mind me saying, but your enthusiasm and drive for digital medicine has led you to becoming a thought leader in this space, or to coin the popular term, the digital opinion leader, or DOL. With over 12,000 followers on your LinkedIn, perhaps would you be able to share with us how you achieved such a feat, and also perhaps provide us with any insights that you may have on the role of DOLs in enabling the closure of knowledge gaps in health sciences and the communities?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we like to I've always used the term KOL, and it's been around forever, right? And so I like changing it, right? So it's a twist on the average terminology or lexicon. So, I start with the fact that as a person, I'm a Scorpio, number one. So I'm very passionate, with my disposition to begin with, but I'm also an extrovert on the Myers-Briggs. And so I get my energy from networking with others, with collaborating with others, sharing knowledge, influencing. And I really enjoy mentorship. I'm part of a lot of mentorship programs. I'll call out Multiple, who does work in the autism space. I really enjoy being a mentor there. But I just enjoy the idea of thought leadership, of kind of pushing the boundaries, advocating for new and innovative technologies. But I'm not a technocrat. I don't believe that technology should solve every solution, right? It's got to be fit for purpose, and it's got to make a difference, right? And be patient-centric. So I start with that of who I am as a person, but then I go through what I think is deep expertise at this point. I mentioned I've been in the field about 6 years now, which is when it kind of started to really gain traction. And so I've been in it a while, and I also try to strive and stay current with the latest research. I have Google automatic searches, so Google emails me every week. What keywords I've typed in to let me know what kind of articles I need to be looking at. Oh, wow. I'm also subscribed to way too many newsletters and things that Monday morning, my inbox is totally full. So I'm oversubscribed in some ways to the field because I love reading about it and I get energized by it, by reading about the latest trends and research and advancements. And it is all moving so fast, right? So you have to continuously be learning in both formal and informal ways. So I mentioned kind of the newsletters and things, but then I'm also in PubMed doing searches. I'm also subscribed, obviously, to Karger to understand what new articles that have come out in the journals that I'm interested in. And Karger, has a lot of amazing resources out there to tap into. So I'm always connected to those, and I'm always sharing widely on LinkedIn. And I actually have a practice that's, I don't know if it's unique to me. It's probably not, but I like to, as I learn, share. So it's usually whatever I'm sharing online is whatever I'm learning about. And a lot of it is stuff I'm just typing into ChatGPT. I've heard this term here or there, and I'm curious about what it means or how it applies in healthcare. I've heard the technical term, but what does that mean for how it's going to change healthcare? And so I'll ask ChatGPT to tell me, what are the possible applications of this new technology? So I can really kind of delve in, and then I share those learnings in kind of like a daily or weekly post or article on my personal LinkedIn. But I also work to give talks at conferences and webinars and participate in a lot of consortia, the Critical Path Initiative, the Digital Medicine Society, the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. Those are all entities that I'm closely aligned with, that I also speak with. So I kind of like to think of myself as sort of an omni-channel kind of person. I feel like everybody needs to be reached in more of a personal way. So I'm not just on LinkedIn. I'm also on platforms like Instagram, not so much on Twitter, not so much on TikTok or Be Real. I don't even know how popular Be Real really is right now, but I know it is sort of taking off. And obviously TikTok is one of the ones that's out there that I certainly don't know much about, but I try to reach people in any way that I can, but LinkedIn is probably the most popular. But in my day job, a lot of what we focus on is partnership. We don't believe that we can do this work on our own. So we have academic partnerships, and I'll call out Stanford University here, who's a great partner to us, as well as other tech makers, and that's big tech startups. It could be big guys or little guys. And we believe that together we build a synergy between the two companies where we kind of complement each other's skill sets and provide resources that each other doesn't have, so that we're kind of capable of doing more together than we are on our own. So that's kind of the R&D lens, I guess. But I would say sort of the greatest needs in the field are really twofold right now that we need to be focusing on. So I know we're talking about me as a digital opinion leader, but I kind of want to bring it back to the needs of the field, right? Cool. And what I'm passionate about. And so although I'm not like a regulatory specialist by nature, there's a lot of regulatory work going on that I'm passionate about sharing links to the FDA and whatever initiatives they have, as well as I mentioned the Digital Medicine Society. They have some great tools that they've put out in the regulatory space. So as things advance really quickly, specifically things like AI, and they're essentially unregulated at this point, right? Regulatory science is something I always have on my radar that I think is important to be talking about. In addition to that, reimbursement pathways, at least in the US, I'm not sure about outside the US, but it's a real problem here. And we've seen really great companies, specifically in the digital therapeutics space. And I think you're probably familiar with who I'm speaking about, but I won't say their name. We've seen them fail because of the fact that they had these great products that were getting great uptake, they were showing adherence, but we simply couldn't get them paid for, and we couldn't get the traction we needed at scale for these companies to stay afloat. So it's been unfortunate. We've had to see some of this turnover and, the market landscape kind of be shifting sands a little bit. But luckily we've got, I'll give another plug here for the Digital Therapeutics Alliance, who has done great work lobbying Capitol Hill in the United States to get bills in front of the right legislator folks to advocate for this field. And I think more than anything, we need advocates just as much as we need people like engineers, developers, and scientists. So I'll wrap up there. I know that was kind of a lot, but
It's great. It's great. It's great to hear your different insights. And I heard you mention obviously omni-channel, and that's quite a big theme at the moment within healthcare, particularly around reaching your target audience and catering for different consumption preferences. So just like we as a publisher are looking to deliver content through various different channels, you yourself, I guess, as a creator are doing the exact same, right? With your mix of LinkedIn and webinars and in-person events and conferences and stuff. It's a similar approach. So that's really good to hear. I'd just like to know, perhaps in your opinion, how you think DOLs or digital opinion leaders can make a difference with regards to outcomes for patients. Are you able to share a little bit of insight on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can be advocates, just as I was kind of alluding to in the last section. I mean, I think personally, my soapboxes that I like to stand on are patient education. So really empowering patients with their own data to be able to talk to their physicians in a better way. Meeting unmet patient needs. Certainly there's plenty of them and there's no shortage, and there's a lot of work to still do. And then there's improving the ecosystem, the healthcare ecosystem in general. So things like policy making, research funding, and just initiating change in the system in general in terms of standards of care and practice. I had the privilege of just last Friday, or was it 2 Fridays ago, being at Stanford University and talking about new care models, specifically within rare disease. But we need new remote care models pretty much across the board. I mean, where we can be doing remote patient monitoring, I believe we should. I think we have an obligation to. And, bringing these care models more equitably to the majority of people, just democratizing care is such a thing that I think that we need to really focus on in terms of bringing resources there so that we can have patients better adhere to their treatment plans. So there are a lot of folks who sort of know what they should be doing, but how do we really enable them in their everyday behaviors and lifestyle to know, what's best for them? I mean, I heard an example recently about a rare disease patient who they have flares essentially when it's really humid out. So how could we use an environmental sensor for that person to allow them to know, well, the humidity is X today, and it may not be the best day to go out for a hike with your family. So things like that. How do we integrate into their people's everyday lives to really improve their lifestyle and the standards of care, and allowing them to really communicate better with their clinicians and care team. And then, historically, my other thing is historically, we've not really put patients at the center of both, research and care paradigms. And I think that's really been a misstep. I think the informed patient is also the adherent patient, right? And so the more we can engage patients and inform them, and the industry is just waking up to this now, which is kind of crazy that it's taken us this long. But we've certainly made strides in the last few years, and certainly since COVID. But I certainly believe in making patient centricity a core tenet of both research and medicine, rather than sort of a buzzword, which I think it has been thrown around pretty casually. But there's still some integration that needs to happen for it to really be kind of the cornerstone of how we deliver care.
Yeah, and you do hear that word, right? The patient centricity is bandied around quite a bit. Maybe putting you on the spot a little bit, but what's a good example of actually patient centricity? What have you seen where you said, "God, this is really good. We should be doing a lot more of this"? Do you have something you could share with us?
Yeah, I could. So at UCB, we are partnering to build products that are platforms. So they're multi-stakeholder platforms in which we have caregivers, patients, and clinicians on the platform. And we're allowing patients to collect patient-reported health data on an everyday basis or every other day, whatever they need to. And this is in the rare disease population. So it's allowing them to track their symptoms, to know when they have a flare coming on in their disease. So essentially, we're trying to keep people out of the emergency room, right? Because if they can make lifestyle changes, in noting certain things that exacerbate their condition, then they can make sure they rest or sleep or get more of X in their diet to avoid that, right? Because we want to keep people out of the emergency room. So it also allows them to objectively say, hey, doc, here are the symptoms I've had over the last 3 months, rather than relying on recall, which is very poor, as we all know. And people, even when they have patient-reported outcomes and they, circle, light, medium, or heavy, or whatever it is, they may not have the best barometer of, knowing exactly how they should report things. So using things like the medical selfie, where they can take photos of themselves, or use video technology or voice recordings. Those are all things that are of interest to us, where we can use digital biomarkers of disease and really objective measurements to communicate better with physicians, and then really track the connection of those biomarkers to better outcomes, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay, that's really useful. I think it's good just to hear a sort of a worked example of how that's actually happening with patients. And I think as you say, them being able to track disease progression, or being able to identify certain areas or things for the clinical team to then be able to pick up on, so that they're not just having to rely on them recalling and remembering what happened 1 or 2 weeks ago, I think is no doubt very useful. In terms of today and hot topics in digital medicine, it would be great to get your insight on this. We maybe that's giving it away, but we talked very briefly, or you mentioned briefly earlier, around ChatGPT, and so no doubt AI is on your list of hot topics. But if you could give us a bit of insight into that and what your thoughts are, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think we're lucky to be in an age now where we're standardizing health data, right? So interoperability is a huge hot topic right now, because we want to build a learning health system, right? At least in the US. I don't know how other countries are approaching it, but if we can get all clinics to be collecting data in the same way, in the same format, we can share data in an anonymized fashion, in a permissioned fashion. and allow health systems to learn from this data to better predict disease, to be able to say who's at high risk for disease so they can reach out to them if they need to prevent disease. And so, interoperability, I would say, is the hottest for the ability to kind of share data in this fragmented health system and make sure that we're treating the whole patient. So by sharing data, we can have shift more towards holistic patient care. And I would also say, because of that, there's the risks, right? So data privacy and security are also a big one. We're now sharing tons and tons of digital exhaust and storing all that data either in the cloud or hopefully not necessarily on-prem, but mostly in the cloud. So we need to really figure out ways to share data that's being stored, or to protect data that's being shared and stored, and make sure that we're preventing any kind of breaches or implications where, things happen that are untoward. So data privacy, security, interoperability, the idea of a learning health system, and of course you mentioned artificial intelligence. So that's huge on my list. I think it's totally transformative. It's actually been around for quite a while, since the 1950s. But the idea of the LLM, the large language model, or the transformer model is fairly new within the last few years. And so we're seeing new applications within artificial intelligence that are kind of moving us from narrow AI to more what's called general intelligence, or AGI. And so we're seeing applications of AI across the value chain already. Within pharma, we're seeing it in drug discovery and in R&D. But in the clinic, we're seeing it really within integration into workflows in the electronic health record. So we're seeing workflow improvement and really what's called clinical decision support. And what's interesting is, I mentioned, clinical decision support has kind of been around for a while. And it's been in the EHR in that whenever physicians are prescribing a medication, they've always been alerted to drug-drug interactions or to potential adverse events. So it's not new within the EHR, but it's expanding its applications within specialty care and things like that. And so I guess, my big vision is, we use tools like TripAdvisor in our everyday life, which is essentially a decision support tool for your planning of your trips, right? So you're looking through, I went to Steamboat recently for Labor Day weekend, and I looked up, okay, what are the top things to do? I mean, just like that is for the recreation industry, that kind of tool. Something similar can be around for clinicians, where they have kind of a suite of options of, here's the evidence behind each one. It's not, there should be a sort of a ranking, but with transparency behind each option, which tells them the kind of evidence there. And really, it should allow them to be better at their job and work kind of at the top of their license, right? So I think we should start with administrative tasks in healthcare. I think those are the easy, low-hanging fruit. But certainly move towards a paradigm in which, we're really assisting clinicians and still having them in the loop. I think human in the loop will be around for a while. But in a nutshell, start with administrative stuff, the easy stuff, the back office, work towards clinical decision support. And then, I've been really actually excited by all the pilot programs sort of happening. I'm seeing a lot of press releases in which we are seeing, Nuance, which is a Microsoft company, really integrate into healthcare systems, with Google too, as well. All the big tech players are in. Folks like Mayo Clinic is really pioneering in this area. But we're seeing people actually try it out. And it's starting with reducing of administrative burden, particularly in, there's a function of Epic called MyChart, where you're messaging patients back and forth. And I think what we're seeing now is clinicians are actually using it to generate responses to patients' queries in a more timely manner, and actually in a more, we've seen published lately, in a more empathetic manner. So we're seeing, and that's very interesting to me, because we always thought, well, certainly AI can't be empathetic, but it can be empathetic. And so there are certainly ways that we can reduce the burden of workload on physicians and clinicians in general. And so by having this kind of automated Gen AI response, where the human is then kind of tweaking it before it gets sent, I think is a good application.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in terms of, obviously, with hot topics, I guess, perhaps following on from that, where do you feel the most significant knowledge gaps are in digital medicine? Which ones perhaps should be addressed with more urgency, would you say?
I mean, I would start with evidence-based approaches. All of this work is new and within the last, like I said, maybe 5 to 10 years. And so there's really a need for comprehensive, high quality research, especially in the effectiveness of digital tools, safety as well. But, we need randomized controlled trials. We need longitudinal trials that show the impact of these tools over time on health outcomes. And we also need to look at usability and human factors. We need to make sure that we're building these tools in a design user-friendly format for, a proper user interface so that patients can better adopt the technology. And I think the Digital Medicine Society, or DIME, is really doing great work here in that they have an upcoming project, I believe it's ongoing, in which they're extending their V3 framework and they're calling it V3 Plus, in which they're adding on usability toolkits for all of us to use to think about how we might run human factors studies and make sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed in the field of usability. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously, this is a Karger live event. I mean, and obviously us as a publisher, it'd be good to get your take on what you think, what role publishers can play in that process. What's the importance, I guess, of a publisher to you?
So their role is to get things out as quickly as possible, right? The peer review process is a peer review process for a reason, but I have in several, not with Karger, in many circumstances, seen peer review take forever. They can't secure a peer reviewer. And it's frustrating to be on the other end of it when you're the one submitting, because you're like, what? They can't, they're this prestigious journal and they can't find a peer reviewer. But so certainly speed is something that can, staffing and making sure that you guys are resourced so that these things can really translate. So not only getting the research out there quickly, but making sure that it's actually making its way into the clinic and people are knowing what to do with the information, that it's accessible. And that also, and I mentioned accessible, I mean, basically, open access. So Karger is a leader in the field of open access. I think that is so important because we can't just be in our ivory towers and only, permissioned people with money in these large academic centers have access to this research. So that is baloney. And we need to make sure that not only is it accessible, but it can be understandable to most readers. So even if you're not a PhD scientist, you can go in and make sense of what these articles are saying or asserting. And also dissemination is a huge thing. So not only making it open access, but actually actively putting it out in the community for folks to chew on. And so, there's sort of three things there, but transparency is also huge. Rigor is huge. Making sure that there are best practices. So really the application of this stuff in the real world, seeing real world case studies, practical guides, review articles, things that synthesize the science to move beyond just the methods and findings to really get into the hands of the right folks so they know how to use it in their clinical practice. And then the last thing I would add would be really discussions about the ethical implications, legal implications, and social implications of this stuff. I think you guys can certainly host forums and debates and commentaries to, make sure there's more awareness around these issues and sort of the softer side of things. And maybe it's also like educational materials too. So making sure that there's sort of a balanced assessment of opposing sides of an argument and things. So kind of playing Switzerland too.
We're a Swiss publisher, certainly. No, I think that's, it's really interesting to hear that perspective from yourself, being obviously outside of a publisher, but working with them and the value that, you feel that they can bring. I certainly take your point on peer review, having that as a robust rubber stamp, let's say, that that research is properly reviewed and considered before it gets published, I think is a key thing and a key value add. So we obviously found you through the Karger Ambassador program, and of course very excited to have you as one of our first ambassadors. Perhaps just leading on from that, share with our audience what appealed to you about the program, and what made you want to join, and what do you hope to get out of it as a Karger Ambassador?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think I've known about you guys for several years now when you first came out with your digital biomarkers journal. Unfortunately, I did not know about you before then because, and I know you have many other journals, so I shouldn't just highlight digital biomarkers, but that is my favorite of your journals. And it's open access, so I can get in at any time. And so that kind of turned me on to learning more about you guys, and then really trying to build a community within this space. I mean, a lot of people are kind of trying to figure this out on their own. And so the more we can build community around the work that we do and make connections and share insights, the better off we all are, right? Mm-hmm. We're kind of stronger together mentality. So I love that Karger provides that opportunity, and it's also an opportunity for us to give Karger feedback as well. So as much as we are getting from you, you're getting back from us. So we can kind of provide feedback on upcoming products and services, on our experience about submitting journals in general or submitting manuscripts.
Yeah.
And so we're also, it's just kind of a give and take. We're able to understand and learn more about the field, get access to upcoming opportunities, and then really generate impact for both patient and clinicians by doing events like these, where we're really kind of bubbling up the issues to the top for people to really work on. And then, I mentioned early at the beginning of the talk that my background has been in clinical operations. So I've never truly been an academic. And, I worked at Northwestern University for several years, but it was never something taught to me very early in my career that we need to be publishing and sharing information more widely. And so I kind of regret that. I wish I had had mentors who were a little, more focused on sharing more formally. And so I want to change that for generations to come, and especially for women. So I want to sort of break down barriers, provide encouragement to young scientists who have a lot to say, but may be intimidated or fearful of criticism, or even just too shy to put their work on display. So I really want to be a role model for others coming behind me and learn from those ahead of me as well, right? There's so much in both directions. And so, you learn also by experience too. And so, I've had the unfortunate, episodes of being rejected by journals, and I want to make that kind of not so taboo as well. Like, these are prestigious journals for a reason, right? They don't just take any content. And so just preaching kind of grit and tenacity and knowledge that you're not going to get accepted 9 times out of 10 on your first submission to a journal. You're going to have to write and rewrite and revise and make sure that your message really lands on the correct audience at the right time. So it's not easy work, but it's work that needs to be done. And I think that we all need to kind of lend a hand to each other to make sure that we're equipped to do this kind of stuff. So that's where all your tools come in handy. And I'm so excited to really delve deeper into more of those and get connections to make sure I'm talking with the right folks and have the right information.
That's great. I think sometimes it's just, having those right connections, knowing who to talk to and asking the right questions. And indeed, for us, as you say, it's a two-way process, right? We get to learn about our target audience, and their needs and what problems or challenges that they may be facing. And on the flip side as well, I think, for someone like yourself, it's great to get the valuable insights from maybe behind the scenes and what goes on in the publishing process, and ask some of those questions where it's perhaps been a bit of a challenge before. I've got another couple of questions that have popped up for me. If you have a couple minutes and I can answer that. Excellent. Perhaps one question that's come in. Could you explain how best to reach and engage patients in a digital world? No doubt there'll be patient advocacy, people listening in, or people in the pharma advocacy, medical affairs. So I mean, what in your experience, what's worked in terms of reaching and engaging with patients?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think we don't need to leave the existing methods of, like I mentioned, the rare disease symposia we brought in patients and caregivers to be a part of the live discussion at Stanford University. That should never go away. But in terms of digitally engaging patients, it's meeting them where they are. So a lot of people will go into these Facebook groups and make sure they're combing those, maybe even with NLP, to find like sentiment analysis and understand how are patients engaging with our products. Are there any unreported adverse events that we need to be considering as far as like safety and efficacy of our products? But we really need to be meeting patients where they are on their existing platforms. So I know a lot of trials advertise to patients in Instagram, for example. Since I'm in research, I get a lot of ads on my Instagram and Facebook and other social media because of my search history. So it's about, I remember when we were doing these like trials really focused on diversity, we would go and speak at Univision in Spanish, so on this television platform that was just for Latinos or Latinas, and make sure that we were not just in our own little bubble that, we thought we knew what patients wanted. We were actually talking with patients and actually in their spheres of influence, just to really understand where they're coming from and how they're experiencing their disease so that we could build better products for them and asking them what they need. Part of the rare disease conference was, just saying, what are the pain points? Tell us from firsthand. And they were like, communication. We have 6 different doctors in rare disease that we have to work with, and none of them talk to each other. And it's impossible to make a decision between those 6 doctors and my huge family. And so hearing those kind of anecdotes firsthand is really important in building user-friendly products that people will actually use and engage with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a big part of that then is you mentioned, using Instagram and Univision, and it's going to the platforms where these patients are active, and actually, there are, as you say, perhaps groups on Instagram and stuff that are dedicated to a specific rare disease or a disease, let's say, and actually being in that space and engaging with them is important then if you're going to be able to get those insights and not just relying on people necessarily coming to you. No, that's great. And there's another question here that's popped up. Where do you see going back to your TripAdvisor analogy that you made earlier, the TripAdvisor for healthcare, how would you see a clinical decision support engine work then, for example? Give us an example perhaps of what you would see that as the future.
Sure. So I kind of think about this in terms of like differential diagnosis. Where, somebody comes in and presents with several chief complaints and you're like, it could be this, but it could be that. And so using the rare disease example or thread that I've used throughout, multimodal data is a huge thing now. So we want to be putting in genetic data. We want to be putting in proteomics and metabolomics. We also want to put in people's phenotypes. So you can take a picture of their face and is there something about their phenotype that may be significant? So I think putting all of those data sources together and then saying, well, based upon this, there's 4 different options of rare diseases that might be possible for this patient. And here's the likelihood of each based upon the information that you have. Here's some additional data you might want to capture that you don't have. But it's really about having a suite of choices and transparency behind those choices to say what their likelihood is or what their confidence of them is. For the clinician to kind of then make their own decision based upon the information in front of them and their clinical training for what most makes sense or what care pathway they want to go towards to gather additional information and whittle down the differential diagnosis.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand. It's something that we've looked into as well in terms of in the skin, in dermatology, can you have an app in terms of putting that over the spot on your arm or a mole or something like that, and then the AI picks it up and compares perhaps that image on your arm with a huge bank of similar images, and then discounts some, and provides those probabilities in terms of is it malignant or benign, or could it be X, could it be Y? And so I think those things are super useful, and they can't be too far off, or even that some maybe I guess are already here and are being trialed. But I would have, you would think within the next few years that a wider rollout across different healthcare or healthcare systems across the world, you would think with all the technology that's available, that these tools will be used more and more.
Yeah, I mean, the parallel is just decision support, right? Here's some information that will help you decide.
Yeah, exactly. And on the sort of the futuristic front, where do you see the future of immersive care and perhaps augmented reality in healthcare, even the possibility of remote surgery in the near future? Do you think that's on the cards or not?
I mean, we've been doing robotic surgery with Da Vinci for a while, so I think there have been some examples of remote surgery, not many. But at least technology assisted surgeries for sure. In terms of like extended reality is the general term. But then with virtual reality, there's certainly examples in like physical therapy. So making physical therapy actually fun. So putting on a headset and gamifying it for people to really be more adherent. And even with exercise and weight loss programs. And in like some bizarre fears, like arachnophobia, for example, exposure therapy through VR can help people really work through what they're afraid of. As far as augmented reality, I really see applications with clinicians in terms of, I don't know if you've seen Google Glass, but they have glasses on, which really give them kind of a check engine light for some folks. So, they can take a look at, so for the average patient, let's start there. They can take a look at their breakfast and see how many calories are there. How can they make better decisions based upon augmented knowledge about what's in front of them, right?
Yeah.
So even for just lifestyle choices every day. And then for the clinician, kind of that check engine, like I mentioned, having lots of different measures in front of them about the patient that they can, so in surgery, for example, what's the blood flow like, or, different information they may need live in the moment to make them more efficient. And it could be things, it's putting all the different data together right in front of you on a dashboard, essentially, so that you're just like when you're driving a car, you're able to see your speed and you're going too fast and you need to slow down. Because not only does my dashboard now show me what my current speed is, it shows me what the speed limit is. And then it'll also, I think, turn red if I'm going above the speed limit. So, I mean, that's it's not augmented reality, but measures like that on, some sort of glasses, I think, or even just using a smartphone and, putting that in front of certain environments can help provide information that people can use to, like I said, make better decisions about, whatever they need to be doing, whether they're a clinician and they're working on care delivery, or they're a patient and they're making decisions in their everyday life.
Okay, and one last one I promise, because I'm conscious of time. You mentioned earlier about social media channels. Someone's asked here about the potential value of TikTok for patient engagement, or patient info and patient engagement. Now, I know you're not an avid TikTok user, but maybe we could extend that out to other social media. What, from your experience, what social media platforms are patients typically on, and which do you think are the most effective, or examples that have been really effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS, the virality of these for awareness of conditions. The more people are aware of them, the more we can get more people to give funding towards research, for example. So I think there are applications in awareness, in correcting misinformation or disinformation about diseases. Like certainly we saw a lot of that during COVID. And you know, whether we like it or not, a lot of people get their news and information from social media rather than from CNN, you know? And so these, going back to meeting patients where they are, we need to make sure, and I think YouTube recently came out and said they're going to correct disinformation on YouTube, on their YouTube channel. They're gonna proactively go and take down videos that are clear misinformation or disinformation. And so just as an educational tool about disease and how to care for yourself. I mean, the first thing that people do when they think they're sick or have symptoms is go Google it, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to be on these social media and search platforms, making sure that the top results that come to the top, or the top video algorithm, is bringing correct information from the CDC or whatever it is, or people who are promoting verified content. That's really, you know, what comes to the top, to make sure that we're sharing information and all kind of. I'm going back to the Trump administration when she was talking about an alternative fact. And so we need to make sure there are no alternative facts on these platforms.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, you know, like you said, actually, the verifying that information that gets put out, you know, even if there was some special, you know, not the blue tick, but a different one, that it had been verified by, I don't know, a medical board or the NHS, for example, here in the UK, or equivalent health system in the US, you know, that information that was on YouTube or Instagram or whatever had that verified, you know, you knew then that you could trust it. I guess that comes back a little bit around to, you know, publishers and the content they put out, that there is some validation in that medical education content, or indeed the, you know, the journal articles, because that goes through peer review. So in a way, that's a nice way of doing it. Of course, we can't cover everything, so, you know, it'd be great if there are other systems out there as well to verify content that's coming through. And obviously with social media and things, it's instant, right? You know, things are put out instantly. So another challenge for us, I guess, to navigate. Well, look, thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate we're at time. I've really enjoyed speaking with you today on the latest in digital medicine, and for your valuable insights. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much, everyone. Awesome. And everyone, please be sure to follow Emily on LinkedIn if you're not already. Well, let's hope we get to the 13,000, the next the next benchmark. For more on digital medicine as well, please be sure to check out Karger's digital biomarkers journal. I think, Emily, you're also a published author in that journal, I believe.
Co-author, yeah.
Co-author, okay, co-author. And if you're if you're an early career researcher or industry professional like Emily, passionate about bridging knowledge gaps and among your networks, and are interested in finding out more about Karger's Ambassador program, then please do get in touch by sending us an email to ambassador@karger.com, and look forward to the next conversation on Karger's LinkedIn Live journey. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Jeff.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.